So, for all of human history, we've been playing sports. And as long as those sports have been played, audiences have been gathering to watch them. But the way that those audiences have looked has changed a lot over time. Here you can see some of our ancestors, playing the ancestors of the sports that we have today. And they had their own ancestor audiences, mainly made of folks in their families and towns, people immediately nearby. There was no Simone Biles, no Lionel Messi, or any other worldwide famous athletes yet. Just folks in your immediate vicinity gathering to play. But as time went on, audiences started getting larger, and people would travel, sometimes long distances, to watch matches. Sports became a force to gather people across geographies, classes, demographics, all to watch and engage. And with the advent of some new technology like radio, sports were taken away from the courts and fields for the very first time, and folks could listen in at home. Sports like baseball and racing became absolute staples. Just a few decades after that, by the time TV came around, you could watch the action from anywhere in the world as if you were there. Audiences could tune in on demand and watch from home. We went from hard stone amphitheater seating to ergonomic sectionals. And nowadays, the vast majority of audiences are still far away from the pitches, the courts, and the fields, watching on their TVs, their phones, their laptops, at all times of night and day. And it's a far cry from where we started. Take the Coliseum, for example. At its time, it was an absolute marvel of sports entertainment. And at its highest capacity, could hold 50,000 people for chariot races and gladiator bouts. But then cut to 2,000 years later, for the 2022 World Cup, 5 billion people tuned in, an audience 100,000 times larger than that of the Coliseum on its best day. It's also an audience that represents 62% of the world's entire population.
You know, with all the good vibes and with people from over 40 countries represented today, I like to think of this as our own little World Cup.
Now, I would have to agree with that, but unlike the folks who are booting up this summer, my personal soccer career came to an end when I quit my JV high school team to do theater instead. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm a product design manager at One North and decidedly not an athlete.
My name is Elliott Muñoz. I'm a creative director at ESPN, and I like to remind people that ESPN did not hire me for my skills, for my sports skills or knowledge. First, a little background. So last year, ESPN launched a fresh, cohesive brand identity. It was thoughtfully integrated across the company alongside our direct-to-consumer launch, ensuring a premium and unified look and feel for fans. Rather than starting a rebrand from scratch, we leaned into our iconic elements. The red, our 7-degree angle, the speed line, our dynamic corners, further distinguishing ESPN as the premium sports destination. And if Jimmy Pitaro is watching, I'm still waiting for my ESPN-branded Porsche. One of the first applications of the rebrand is going to be our Universal Insert Framework. We call it UIF for short. Insert frameworks are nothing new. We've all seen them. We probably just never knew they were called that. I certainly didn't until I started working on one. Insert frameworks are any visual layered over top of in-game footage. While the templates exist, the information you see is rarely produced in advance, meaning they're generated and played out in real time. They include information on players, teams, and talent to provide a story alongside gameplay and commentary. The information that's presented must be concise, informative, and most importantly, timely. Traditionally, insert packages are created on a sport-by-sport basis. That means basketball would look different from football, would look different from baseball, would look different from hockey. So you get the idea. Now, as a designer, don't get me wrong, this is a designer's dream. But it can also be logistically challenging, very, very costly, and fracture the viewer's connection with the ESPN brand. UIF will deliver a unified look and feel, reinforcing brand recognition and functional consistency across all sports we broadcast. It's a seamless integration of the ESPN brand across all live sports and programming. It should be something that fans instantly recognize as ESPN. This is going to be, without a doubt, an enormous effort across our teams. Our goals for this effort are strategic. Leverage ESPN's brand identity and increase consistency across programming. allow our content to be recognizable from anywhere, increase design and dev efficiencies by reducing the need to build and maintain separate creative directories, and then free up those teams and resources to better sustain and enhance visual presence across platforms. So some lofty goals. Before we got started, we wisely took a look at our process and tools, and surprised, we found some pain points. First, our designers worked on files outside of a centralized source, as in their individual machines, because the tools wouldn't allow them to create in the cloud. So files very quickly became out of sync. Nearly every insert graphic includes some form of team data. Team data includes individually colored assets and rules with wildly different text lengths, say UNC versus Mississippi State. When you stress test for hundreds of teams across dozens of screens, this becomes untenable fast. Knowledge and resource sharing came at finite points throughout the project, typically during team reviews when presenting the work. When creating graphics at scale, that lack of continual sharing can result in time-consuming and costly mistakes. And so to help us meet our goals and address some of those pain points, we brought in Matt and One North to help us get there.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar, One North is a full-service digital agency and one of the very first certified Figma signature service partners. And at One North, we work with big brands and large enterprise clients, helping guide them towards what's next for them and their business. And at One North, we are no stranger to Figma migrations. We do a lot of them pretty often. But most of these migrations happen from a different product design tool into Figma, and also take place within traditional development environments. With this migration, neither of those were true. This was setting up to be a unique challenge that we had never seen before, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm going to back up and start from the very beginning first. So like most of our net new engagements, we started with a discovery phase first, to sort of wrap our heads around the work, get a lay of the land, and figure out what exactly we'd be migrating. First and foremost, we had to learn what an insert graphic was, and Elliott and his team was very kind and let us know. And there were also 8 types of them that we'd be migrating first and foremost. But this was just the start. We then learned that the insert types could be broken down into 140 sub-layouts. But this also felt totally manageable. I mean, if there are only 140 artboards in your file, did you even open Figma? But then we learned that the content within each of these sub-layouts can also impact the design. So with ESPN, they cover over 50 sports and leagues, which brings a ton of content, getting you up to 7,000 individual designs. Then you have to think about all of the teams in each of these sports and leagues, which takes you north of 10 million. Oh, and then you have to think about each player, coach, staff member, all of their details and stats, both past and present. Now, if you all had to do some really quick math, where do you think that leaves us? Maybe a billion? 10 billion? This is when you all find out that I don't know sports and I also can't do math. But thankfully, we already have the answer for you. For those of you who are guessing 2 trillion, you are right on the money, and we are terrified. This is looking to be the biggest and most complex migration we had ever undertaken. Take things that would be really simple on other projects, for example, like the color red. In other projects, a single shade of red appears maybe once in things like error states, maybe more if it's a brand color. But red is not only ESPN's brand color, but the brand color of teams in every single league and sport. Literally hundreds of teams. And they're all different specific shades of red with their own guidelines, usage rights, and legal teams to make sure we're showing each red correctly. Now, to borrow a metaphor from a sport that I do not know very well, you know in football when a receiver catches a kick and is tasked with running it back down across the field against a wave of oncoming opponents? We started to feel like we were that receiver facing an onslaught of obstacles trying to stop us. And we were definitely surrounded by obstacles. At this point, we were a little overwhelmed, a little daunted, but we also recognized that there was work to be done, and we were on a tight timeline. The only way forward was to take it 1 yard at a time and break our problems down into the smallest parts. So that's exactly what we did.
If you spend any time in a design system, and I know my audience, so I'm assuming you guys have, those parts are probably pretty familiar to you. First, we dissected the file. We noted every treatment, every glow, every mask, every bit of content, and how they all fit together within the file. Once we understood how they were currently put together, we started from scratch in Figma, creating elements, refactoring, and implementing best practices into wireframes from the start, instead of trying to shoehorn them into the designs when they were half-baked. Once we mapped our content into wireframes, we started building out tokens and establishing visual theming. This is where we focus on matching the visuals from Photoshop into Figma. We started with a handful of teams and collected their colors, logos, and set them up as themes. From there, we got our team data defined in the variables, ready for implementation into the final designs. And then we roll it all up into our components and variants that later became our final clock and scoreboard designs. After getting the clock and score designs done, it felt like we had gotten points on the board. Our library was started, and we had one insert design underway. We hadn't won the game yet, but we were headed in the right direction.
And so we went back, and we did it again, this time with another insert design called Towers. But now we had components figured out. We had styling tested, and we had familiarity with the original files. This second layout went faster than the first. And as we went further, our library became more and more robust. And so we did it again and again. Now, our design system grew and was refined with each new round of iteration, but I don't want to say that this process was without setbacks, because that wouldn't be true. Sometimes it did feel like the work was putting points up on us. For example, it was occasionally a struggle to match the styling from the old original files to the new ones, not even because of Figma limitations, but because we had never used Figma in this way before. We had to learn and upskill as we went. There were also concessions that we had to make from time. For example, we had this really big goal of implementing a universal type ramp across all of the insert designs. But due to time constraints, we had to break down type between each insert graphic. But even in the face of adversity and challenges and setbacks, we kept rolling. We kept putting points on the board until the clock ran out.
So when the final whistle blew, where did we finish? As we wrapped our engagement, these are the milestones we had met. First, we had done our job and gotten all of our insert designs into Figma. They weren't all perfect, but they were all accounted for. And most importantly, we had proven that we could be done, and it could be done with new efficiencies. We'd also gotten our design library up and running. Not only was this applied to existing insert designs we'd migrated over, but it could also be utilized in composing new screens in Figma. And lastly, we'd taken the first steps to get the team on board. We proposed a new workflow of creating, updating, and documenting insert designs all within Figma, and helped the rest of the team understand the work that we had done. We set up a second phase of work with One North to train UIF designers on how to build using our new Figma workflow and design library. Most importantly, what did we learn? And what can you take back to your team? The first big lesson, while a task this large might be challenging, it's worth it. Would it have been easier for our team to stick to the old ways and previous ways of building? Absolutely, at least in the short term. But Figma offers scalability and efficiencies that will pay off the more our team creates. An investment of a few months of hustle and training leads to faster, flexible, and more productive teams.
The next lesson is to treat your design system problems with a design system lens. So obviously, this problem space was really complex, and we were looking for a way to systematize our approach. And we immediately thought of how we tackle new design systems by looking for your foundations, your atoms, your molecules, and so on. We found our foundations in why ESPN was doing this work in the first place, the efficiencies and the optimizations we were looking for. Then we sought out our atoms, the absolute smallest problems that we could tackle right away. Things like dissecting the existing files and also wireframing for the very first time in Figma. Then we took those solutions and worked on the next size up for our problems, our molecules, by making those wireframes higher fidelity and testing variations in styling. Our smaller pieces rolled into larger ones until we were able to tackle entire insert designs. After our first pass, each subsequent one became more and more efficient.
Next thing was none of this matters if the organization doesn't change alongside the software. Your design system is only as good as the designers that are utilizing it. Invest in education, upskilling, and don't be afraid to adjust to better fit your design team. Everyone learns at a different pace and in different ways. They'll gravitate to different features. Managing your expectations can help you get everyone trained up with as little frustration as possible.
And lastly, the biggest lesson, and arguably the hardest one to swallow, is that the work isn't ever completely done. Sure, our engagement came to an end, we had migrated everything that we had sought out to migrate, and we would have loved to tie it up in a bow and say, cool, nobody ever has to touch this work ever again. But the truth is, design systems will always need to be iterated upon as long as they're being used and new designs are coming online. In full transparency, there are areas that still need ironing out and opportunities for us to keep working. But that's why we're doing this type of design in the first place, to leave things better than we found it. The audiences for these graphics are the biggest they've ever been, by far, as are the challenges. But we know after this engagement that 1 yard and 1 pixel at a time, we can handle them.
Like any good team, we have to take the time to shout out all the players that helped us get to this point, from project managers to designers to leadership that empowered us to be able to do this work. Thank you to all of them. And thank you for listening, and for those that tuned in on the live stream. Look for the debut of our fully functioning clock and score during Monday Night Football this NFL season.